All right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Acquisitions Anonymous. I'm Mill Snell, one of your co-hosts, and Acquisitions Anonymous is a growing and aspiring podcast. We are, like Michael said, we are the number one and we are the last small business acquisition podcast because we haven't found another yet. But we usually will anonymously talk about two companies for sale. And we're often joined by a guest who brings some kind of subject matter expertise, which we have today. But I'm joined by Michael Girdley today, our co-host. Hey, Michael.
Good morning.
Sorry, you were muted. My bad. And we have a very special guest today, also a Michael, but Mike Loftus. Mike, thanks so much for being here, man.
Thanks for having us, guys.
So, Mike, give us the rundown on you. I just found you on Twitter and started following you, and it seems like you are the real deal in the sense that you have not just done one acquisition, but you've done a few, and all within a specific niche. So, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. So I got a finance degree at SMU and played football there. And then I moved back to California. And I had zero clue what I wanted to do. I just couldn't be cooped up. And that's one thing I made sure I couldn't do. And kind of stumbled around, and kind of realized that I like being outside and I like plants. And I was talking to my old man, and he's like, well, commercial landscape maintenance, like, you should look into that. I'm like, well, I don't know anything about it at all. I think I've mowed 2 lawns, and I think I was drunk one time in college, so I don't think that counts. And I was like, well, how do I learn? So I went and worked at a huge landscape company at minimum wage to learn everything. I did that for about 1.5 years. And then I was like, you know what? I've dug enough holes. I've mowed enough lawns at $15 an hour or 12 or whatever I was getting paid. I'm going to start my own thing. So it's kind of the classic grab a truck and a trailer and just, beat down everybody's door and, just very gradually, brick by brick, added a guy, add another guy, add a truck, I kind of slowly kind of creeped forward. And then I got to a point where I'm just hitting a wall. Like, I can't find people, getting accounts takes forever. So I just Googled, hey, landscape business for sale, and Biz by Sale comes up. And I spent probably 2-3 days just diving into, all this different stuff for sale. And learning a lot about, what they want for it and what's good, what isn't good. And looked at a bunch, finally found one about 4 years ago that I liked, made an offer on it, and I closed the first one, and I did 2 more since, similar size. We're at about 54 employees now. And learned a lot.
That's awesome, man. That's really cool. So you did your kind of 1 year down and dirty apprenticeship in the trenches. How long ago was that?
So that was 8 years ago, 8.5 years ago. And then I've had my own business 7 years, going on 8.
Okay. So you're kind of in it for 3 years, then you do your first acquisition, and then you've kind of continued to roll with additional acquisitions since.
Yeah. First 3 years, very slow, very unglamorous, but good learning.
Love it. When's the last time that you actually performed landscape maintenance work?
Oh, I would say 6 years.
Nice. You're doing good, man. You're doing good.
Yeah.
That means you have some redundancy in the business. All right, we're going to get into our deals. But before we do that, Michael, you have a word from one of our sponsors?
Yes. In our never-ending quest to have this podcast break even, we have 2 sponsors today. So the first one is the folks from More, and they're at morenow.com. So that's Greg and his team. We've talked to them, and if you're on Twitter and social media, you're seeing more and more people building teams offshore. So the More folks specialize in particularly building teams in the Philippines. So they do more than just virtual assistants. So you can bring in folks that are more specialized around marketing, sales, operations as well. And they've helped people build teams, arrest head of operations, supply chain, all that kind of stuff. So, and their model is pretty cool. They charge a fee as part of the first year salary, so a percentage there, just like a typical staffing agency. And then they do ongoing support and give a 12-month guarantee. So if you're interested in hiring folks overseas, especially in the Philippines, you can go to morenow.co, talk to Greg and his folks. And if you mention Acquisitions Anonymous, you get 20% off your first hire. So thanks to them for supporting the podcast today.
That's awesome. Thanks, guys. All right, Michael, you have our first deal, right?
Yes, I have pulled this up. I always love these podcasts where we start with one the guest hates because they make really entertaining stuff. So, but Mike knows that this one is one of those deals that looks cool at first, but then when you dig into it, it's actually horrendous. So I'm excited to learn from that. So it's a listing for Buy Biz Sell. The title of it is In Contract, a luxury landscape design build maintenance firm located in Orange County, California. And for those of you not online, you can see, or not on YouTube, you can see that there's a beautiful picture of a wonderful backyard with an infinity pool and some crap like that. Based in Orange County, so Southern California, Mike's backyard. They are asking $1 million approximately for this business, $403,000 in cash flow they claim. Gross revenue is $1.3 million, has no inventory, and it's been around since 1987. The way the description is, this is not an ordinary landscaping company for sale. This award-winning Orange County-based luxury landscape design build maintenance company creates exceptional high-end outdoor experience for the most discerning homeowners. Typical design build projects are over $1 million or $100,000. So let's see. So if they're doing $1.2 million in revenue, that means they're doing about 12 projects a year. Okay. One a month. They also do maintenance services for luxury homeowners that want their landscapes maintained at the highest quality, and they do not compete with typical landscaping companies offering basic gardening services for tract homes. That's kind of a mean sentence. The company had $1.2 million in sales with $400,000 in discretionary earnings for the owner and is on track for $1.5 million in sales in 2021. And they've been established for 30 years and has an experienced staff of 6, with several having been with the company for 20 years. It's been pre-approved by SBA lenders for qualified vendors with 10-year or qualified buyers with 10-year financing and a down payment of $165,000. By the way, we learned in a previous episode, if you see this sentence, it's total BS. Like there is no pre-approval for SBA.
Also, just because SBA says something, that doesn't make it a good business. That's another interesting. SBA says it's good. You should too. Like, no.
This is a great point. Okay, so the business is being sold for $1 million. Supposedly makes $400,000 in discretionary earnings. Seems like the owner is working in the business full time. In this situation, they are trying to lure you in with high SBA financing, and the owner is willing to finance a five-year note at 7% for $100,000 of the purchase price. So. Staff of 6 as an office manager, a couple foremen, and then 3 construction and maintenance crew. And then there's a bunch of stuff in here about day-to-day. And it is, I think, important that the seller wants to retire after doing this for 30 years and is willing to stick around for a while, especially where the licensing is required. So the C27 landscape contractor's license, which I guess is a California thing. Mike, is that what that is?
Yeah, big deal in California. You got to have it. You got to have the license to do all kinds of stuff. You also have to have workers' comp, which is a big deal in California. It's a big hurdle.
Yeah. Do you know what kind of license you need to open a landscaping business in Texas? It's a driver's license.
0. Yeah, and barely. Yeah, I left it at home. Oh, you're good.
Cool.
Yeah, Texas
so it's a different. It's the Wild West. It still is. So what do we think of this one?
So there's a few issues. So the margin that he says he's making is wild. There's no way he's making $400,000. So we can just start with that. I could slice that up a bunch of ways, but the other issue is
why is that that's fantastic.
So a lot of times what these guys do is there's 6 employees that handle, part of these jobs. So these jobs are, going to do plaster the pool, new patio, new pavers, new barbecue, new landscaping. So they might handle 2 of those in-house, and then they subcontract the rest of this work to other people. Where this guy makes his margin is he has subcontractors that aren't contractors. They're just guys in a truck that he can call that he pays out of pocket, which in the state of California is illegal because you got to have a license. And that's where they're making a lot of this margin that this guy won't talk about. He's showing you that 6 guys do all the work, which I don't buy. I have 6 guys and I know how much they can do. It's not that much.
So you buy this business and you're like, oh, this will be fine. I'll keep doing it this way. And then you realize, oh, if I have a moral compass, or if I want to do things above board for, as far as the state of California is concerned, I now have to hire licensed subcontractors, which is totally fine, right? You could do that,
Right.
but you're not going to make nearly as much money, right? Because those guys have more costs too.
And then secondary to that, which I think is actually more important, is these 6 guys will leave for $1 each an hour. So this, and those guys are gone. Whatever, this $1 million you just paid, see you later. It's gone. It's out the window. The labor market out here is a bloodbath. It's absolutely, every day is a battle. Keeping people is not easy. And if you haven't done it before, I'll wish you luck. So for that reason, I don't like it. You also have to keep bidding work to win it. So you got to go keep landing, $100,000 projects to keep it going. There's no reoccurring here. The day that you stop going and giving estimates is the day that you have no work. And it's hard for me to pay a multiple on cash flow, even if it's the right cash flow, where I have to keep bidding stuff and winning stuff constantly. There's no, I'm going to take a few months off. No, you got to keep bidding. You got to keep winning. It's kind of a vicious cycle. So
let's talk about that a little bit, because that's my world. that's what I do, right? In commercial roofing, we have probably 20% of our revenue is recurring from service and maintenance work, but everything else we do, we have to win via bid. Mm-hmm. And I hear what you're saying, especially if 90 to 100% of your revenue is recurring or reoccurring, right? Like you get churn, right? And you think about customer acquisition costs and lifetime value of customer and all those things. I could totally see how, if you're used to 90% of that or 100% of that you look at bid work and you just, you start sweating and you get uncomfortable, and it's like, man, that's so unpredictable.
I think there's a volume piece of that. That's a big,
Mm-hmm.
I have no problem with bid work, but you got to get a certain size. You got to have estimators. If you have it big enough, it can work, right? But also any economic downturn, this is, projects at houses where people are pulling a second, and let's spend $100,000 in the backyard. Absolutely not necessary. It's not a commercial roof where things have to be done, on a $10 million building, right? I don't really count what you're saying as commercial roofing in the same bucket at all.
Sure. Yes. Yeah, no, I agree. This is definitely a discretionary, category of spending. I love that he says, we don't do work in tract homes. I've been to Orange County. I have not been over every square foot of Orange County, but I didn't see any tract homes there, So I thought that was kind of an interesting jab to make. But to me, there's this trade-off, right? If you have reoccurring revenue like your business, or recurring revenue like your business, then that's probably more competitive, right? Everybody wants that stuff. And you could, as long as you're doing a good job, you're probably keeping it, right?
It's sticky. It's very, very sticky.
And chances are nobody's going to come in and be able to do it for like 60% of what you're doing it for, or at least not sustainably, right? They're not going to have the same quality or whatever. It's not apples to apples, but it is competitive, right? It's, it's a bloodbath in the sense that everybody wants that work. To me, the trade-off with bid work, at least for us, is that there's more margin there, right? It is one time, right? And, you may own $1 million building and you're going to have to spend $200,000 and $250,000 on your roof. That may only happen once every 20 or 30 years, but that's why we extract maybe more margin, so to speak. But I hear you. I just am fascinated in kind of the difference, right, between the nature of those two different types of work.
Yeah. And I think that, on commercial roofing, I don't care how bad things are getting. They're going to mow the lawn outside. And if there's a leak, they're going to fix it. There's just not, there's not like, well, the market doesn't look very good. Like, well, I got a roof and I got to fix it. This, I need $100,000 pool. No, that's going to be gone very quick.
So with 6 full-time employees in this business, Mike, is this kind of like maybe a person in the office, a person who's kind of answering the phone, like a very junior person, a person who's kind of wearing a bunch of hats, handling AR, AP, some administrative duties, and then everybody else is in the field like a project manager?
Yep. I think they got one person, she's probably remote, and she's taking calls. She's probably scheduling new meetings for new work, probably cutting the payroll is my guess. If he is paying payroll and not paying under the table, which that's something you'd find out once you dig into this more. But I'm guessing he's going one project at a time, and everybody goes to the same project. And he just kind of jumping from project.
What do you think the chances are that this owner is not doing, if not 100% of the estimating, then like 95% of the estimating?
He's doing everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. It says here, actually, and this one thing I do like about this listing, a lot of the business brokers try to obscure the fact that you're buying yourself a job. This one is at least truthful about it. It's like, look, you cannot be an absentee person doing this business. And I guess, Mike, what you're saying, which is you suspect very strongly that if they're making this much money, they are doing some illegal stuff to get there. Then there's no, you can't hire somebody and be like, welcome to the job. It's time to break the law. So I do like that they're at least honest about it, that, okay, like you're not buying an asset here. You're buying yourself a job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wouldn't want to buy a job at a multiple. So.
Yeah. Yeah. It's super interesting. And I guess there's also a slippery slope that if you're okay paying subs under the table, what other shenanigans are you doing with regards to some of these W-2 employees, especially, in a bloodbath labor market like you're talking about? Is he handing people cash under the table? Is he doing shenanigans around that stuff? Like, once you start, it's hard to stop.
There's also different like power dynamics within the 6 people, right? Even if they're all above board, they're great guys, everything. If that main guy, that foreman guy, he could come to you and say, you know what, if he understands the where he's at in it, he can say, we all want $5 more an hour, all of us, or we're going to leave tomorrow. There's nothing you can do. You're going to pay him because you have no option. You're fresh into this industry. It's not like you have a list of 40 people you can go call. You don't have anybody banging on your door like, hey, I want a job. That doesn't exist. So that's another risk you're going to take getting into this.
Is there a price you pay for this business, Mike? I mean, clearly not 2.5 times SDE, seller discretionary earnings.
I think if he wanted to throw his hands up and I'm done, I got to go. I'm moving to Texas. It's the end of the world. I hate California. I'd say I'll give you $10,000 down and I'll give you a piece of what I make for 2 years. And you don't like that deal? No problem. I'm going to sit back. I'm going to wait for more deals to come. And, you have to sell. I don't have to buy. And I like being in that situation.
Yeah. Well, it is consistent, Mills, with something we've seen a lot, which is there's a number of these businesses that just have no transferable value whatsoever, right? It's not worth anything to anybody but you. And maybe even worth negative. Like you're going to have to pay somebody to take it off your hands. Yeah, you'd have to pay me to take this. A lot of money.
Yeah. Yep.
So I guess though, like when you look at it, right, and this is something we bump into a lot. People are doing real estate deals for like 4.5 caps, and here you have a business that if you just if you put $100,000 down, right, and let's say the margin is not real, right, and you deal with a bunch of surprises, and the cash flow is only $200,000 a year. You got some debt service. It's probably, call it maybe $80,000 a year. Like you're still buying an okay job and trying to price it for a bunch of things going wrong.
Yep.
Like at, as an outsider, right? I don't want to buy this business, but if I were in Orange County and I needed something to do and I wasn't afraid to work and get my hands dirty, except for the fact that this is all, one-time work and it's very discretionary, the price doesn't seem like crazy outlandish to me, just right as a multiple. And I think a lot of people, right, if they're used to looking at real estate deals or used to looking at deals up market, even in the
Yep.
lower middle market, they look at this and they're like, how could I go wrong? It's like 2.5 times SDE.
And you
And you're
can very
saying,
quick.
yes, yeah, it can erode.
The more I think about it, the one person that should buy this is someone who's young and scrappy and who wants to make a deal with this guy. Whether it's, hey, I'll work for you for a year at this wage, and then I'll buy you out over 4 or 5 years. I mean, I'm talking about somebody that doesn't have any assets to bring to the table except for time and effort. And then after 4 or 5 years, you own a business, right? And you can kind of correct things that weren't right and grow it if you want. And if he is making 250, that's not bad over here. And that's not 10 hours a day what this guy's doing. I guarantee you. You could do this in 4 hours a day.
So if you just look at multiples of landscape businesses in your segment of the market and the things that you look at, and because you obviously know what transacts because you've done 3 acquisitions, right? And then you own one kind of legacy business you created, and you see stuff, right, that gets away, or like what you have a good finger on the pulse of it. If this was reoccurring revenue, is 2.5 times reasonable?
If it was reoccurring, and they had the right staff in place, there's no way he'd be making 400 on 1.2. So
Sure. Kind
let's
of
say
margins aside, right?
I think he could squeeze 200. And I think in this market you can get 2 to 3. And I think the financing becomes very interesting relating to that price, right?
Yep. Interesting. All right. Well, let's hear a word from our other sponsor, and then let's look at a deal that we may like a little bit more.
Cool. Our second sponsor is CloudBookkeeping. So we've talked before. This is Mike, by the way. This is our only sponsor that happens to be one of my neighbors, and I met Charlie through this podcast. So the power of social media is that I'm connecting with people that live 3 blocks away. So what Charlie does, and he's got an all US based staff, is outsourced bookkeeping for small businesses. So he and I went to lunch, seemed like somebody I would trust doing my books. And they specialize in QuickBooks oriented bookkeeping. And so if you're in the market for wanting to get your company out of doing your books and focus on things that are more important, you can try them, and you can reach Charlie and his folks at cloudbookkeeping.com. Great domain name, does exactly what they talk about. Give them a try. I think good pricing model and good service and good people, and they're from San Antonio. So it's wins all around. So, thanks to cloudbookkeeping.com for sponsoring the podcast today. So back to you, Mills.
Yeah, thanks. This next one, we're going to anonymize a little bit and not pull up a teaser or a SEM. We're just going to kind of obfuscate the details a little bit. So this business is also based in Southern California. It is a landscape and commercial property maintenance business. So still within Mike's wheelhouse. The business has been around since the 70s. They're asking a little over $1.5 million, and they want almost all of that down, cash up front, but they're willing to hold a little bit of a seller's note, about 10% seller's note. And the business has kind of held steady from the revenue that we can see. In 2018, it was, a little over $1 million. 2019, a little bit of growth, still a little over $1 million. 2020, still in that range. But then on a trailing 12-month basis, and these numbers are kind of from the end of 2021, the business has grown a good bit. It's up over $1.5 million. And the earnings on that in the previous years was all kind of, low 300s to mid $300,000 in SDE is what they're saying. Obviously, in the last 12 months, as the business has grown from, kind of 1.1, 1.2 to this 1.6 level, a lot of that has fallen to the bottom line, and their SDE reported is a little over $500,000. They're saying that they hold very little inventory, a few $1,000s, and that the estimated fair market value of their equipment is just a tad over 300,000. They've got, some facilities, some yard space and storage space. The rent is nominal, less than $1,000 a month. They have 14 employees, and they say that it's, recurring and returning revenue, stable income stream. They've got a good customer base, and the organization's really efficient. It's interesting. So this business actually, we said it's been around since the 70s, but it was acquired by someone a handful of years ago, not too long ago, about, I guess, 5 years ago. And they've grown the company, and I guess they're looking to transition. So it seems like they've made some improvements. Like they have GPS in their vehicles, right? Not typical of a mom and pop business that's been around for, almost 50 years. And they use, internet-based time tracking for their employees. They say they have 14 loyal employees, but then they also can occasionally use, independent contractors. The business, they're showing some historical financials that go back prior to the acquisition, and it looks like, it's kind of held steady, right, until this last 12 months. The current owner, lives, I think it looks like, in the area, but manages most of everything remotely. And then, he travels into the company. So he's just within driving distance, 1 day a week. He's saying he spends 10 hours a week on the business, doing, scheduling, some kind of customer requests, overseeing an office manager, doing some spot inspections, it looks like, approving the billing, and any kind of major equipment purchasing and training and those kind of things. Maybe let's kind of leave it at that, because Mike, you know this deal better, and you'll kind of help us hit the highlights of it. What things jump out at you about this business? Good, bad, and ugly.
So the first thing that jumps out, I think someone on Twitter actually mentioned something similar, is when people say the reason they're selling is for other opportunities, right? So tell me about your opportunity that's 10 hours a week that makes you $500,000. And what's better than that? Because I want to look at that. I this is interesting, but I want to go look at whatever's a better opportunity than that.
Yeah. Show me the deal that you're going to redeploy capital into.
love to see that one too. So that's a little fishy to me. It looks like a pump and dump a little bit. You added $500,000 of revenue in a year. I'm in the business. I think it also says on there that there's no advertising. So I'd love to hear how you explain that to me. Maybe you got a big customer or something like that. But in my mind, this is a business that does 1.1 or 1.2 million. You're the average of 3-4 years. You're not your last year. So, in my mind, the 500 is an interesting number. Might be real for that 1 year, but to me, it's a 1.1 making 300.
Yep.
And I would base, an offer based on that, and not just on, hey, here's this beautiful year I put together. You should pay me multiple on this beautiful year. So that's my take.
Does this kind of fall into that category of business that we're not really sure what COVID did to that business for the long term? And of course, the seller wants to use this past year as the basis for valuation, and you're the buyer. You want to use the average of the last 5 years.
I don't think this COVID has not affected this guy. in my mind. It's all exterior stuff at buildings, which has stayed really steady throughout everything.
So why did they see, do you have any theory for why they saw such a big bump during COVID time?
Yeah, I think they got a big customer. I think he got some customer that represented, $500,000 in work or 400. And I think he saw a good opportunity to sell. That's my intuition.
The info we have does say, and I didn't get to this part, but they have one account that's 30% of their revenue, and the top 3 customers are like almost 50% of revenue. So yeah, it could be right. You need to look at that historically and really get detail on the history of those accounts. But okay, yeah, 1.6 million in revenue, 30% of that, so maybe had a little bit of organic growth, but then a lot maybe came from one account. Mike, so is this work typically, obviously if you're going to a homeowner, it's just kind of month to month, right? They can cancel any time, or maybe they have a 1-year contract or something and you cut them a break. The commercial work may have a little bit more contractual basis, but I'm thinking like not necessarily just to a building owner. Like if you went to a municipality, right, and said, hey, we're going to handle, and it doesn't seem like these guys are doing this, but like we're going to keep the parks, right, or a couple parks, or the side of the road, right, or some public space, or around municipal buildings. That might be maybe 3-year contract at the most.
Yeah,
What
they're
do you
1
see
to
on
1 to
that?
3. It's interesting you bring that up. So the city stuff is, razor thin margin. You're playing with big players who are massive, and they only let you make so much. Sure, it's a 1 to 3 year contract, but at the end of that contract, you're rebidding it, and all those guys are coming back trying to take it.
Yep.
Whereas you have these, one-off buildings or shopping centers or whatever that are technically a 30-day contract, but in reality, it's a contract till you mess up most of the time.
Yep.
And somebody who wants to grind you on the price every 60 days, that's not a customer you want anyway. So it's kind of a get out of here.
It's really, you're hinting about one of those things that is, I've seen it happen in software too, where people are like, I want to have 2-year contracts, or I want to buy a business with 3-year contracts. And when you get into it, you understand that eventually there's some things that are a lot more attractive about being just month to month with an indeterminate amount, right? There's no break point where some building manager has to be like, okay, well, it's time to renegotiate and shop our deal because it's up. And there's also the other side is if, and one of the things I'm worried about with this business is if you start having to pay $30 an hour to have people go out and do the maintenance and you're stuck in a fixed price contract, what happens to your margins? So yeah, you can't respond to cost increases, in a very agile way. So how do you think about the labor pressure on a business like this?
It's not as bad. You have more people. But I think that the real pressure here is, do you know how to keep these customers? Do you know how much, you want to buy stuff that's low touch? The more times I have to, reach out, meet with you, all this stuff, that means if I'm not doing it, I got to pay somebody to do it. So I make less. This kind of work, the good news about this is I guarantee you it's very low touch. They've had these customers, that $1 million solid that has, that's been there for a while, and it's going to stay as long as you kind of do what you're supposed to do.
In looking through this material, there's, they said $300,000 worth of assets, and I would think, okay, $1 million landscaping, you got trucks, trailers, stuff like that, but they have 3 pretty big, specific pieces of equipment, like sweepers. And this is an interesting facet of this business, that they have sweeping routes. So you got 3 trucks, that means 3 drivers, right? And they sweep 7 nights a week from 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. That is super interesting. Probably, reoccurring in nature, right? That's going to be a contract with a municipality or a neighborhood or an HOA or something. But man, that's kind of asset intensive, right? One of those trucks goes out and Those aren't, it's not a $50,000 pickup truck.
No. The new stuff can be 150,000 easy.
Yeah.
I think
So
on the
that's
flip side,
50% of SDE on a
Yeah.
normalized basis, right? For
The
one
flip
truck,
side
you
is-
have three.
the sweeping stuff is very valuable. They don't come up a ton because they're easy to run. I talked to a guy that has a small one, and he said, "You know what, Mike? I work 45 minutes a day. And my company makes $10,000 a month, and I hang out with my wife. I get my coffee, go about my day, and I got two guys that run around. And I think it's got to work for you, not necessarily anybody else."
It seems like part of this company's strategy is we do landscaping, we do sweeping, we'll pressure wash, we do they have day porter down. What is that? Like, hey, you're doing some work in your yard and you want us to send you a guy?
So basically, day porter is at a building, shopping center. It's more shopping center oriented. You got trash cans, you got all this different stuff. You have to have someone that goes by and takes the trash out. Cleans up. If somebody dumps some crap, you got to have someone that picks it up. And that's going to probably, it's kind of sweeping down, sidewalks and kind of just keeping things generally clean, which is recurring. And it's a good business. I agree.
Yeah,
And it's interesting because if this guy gets a new property, let's say, hey, we want a landscape quote. Okay, you go in there, you get the landscaping quote. Oh, by the way, we do sweeping and we can do pressure washing, and I'll make you a package deal.
Yeah.
So you almost can double you double on every customer you get. You can potentially get, the other facet of your business to grow as well.
What do you think of that strategy? Like, hey, we're the one-stop shop, right, for some of these needs versus, hey, all we do is pressure washing, right? Or all we do is landscape service. Do you guys have you employed a similar strategy?
A little bit. An interesting thing about this one, for let's say you're a bigger landscaper acquiring this, is the first day that you acquire this business, you're going to all your existing customers and you say, "Hey guys, all this, 200-300 buildings or whatever you have, we offer sweeping now.
Yeah.
Do you want a quote?" And you kind of overnight can cross-pollinate those and probably grow just on the customers you already have. Once you understand that side of it.
Yeah.
So, Mike, how, if you were to pursue this deal, which it sounds like you might be, you sound much more enthusiastic about this than the pool building dumpster fire we looked at before. But so how would you underwrite a deal like this? Like, how do you figure out what you're willing to pay for, what you would offer, and maybe even second step of that, how would you justify it to the seller?
So in my mind, last year was an outlier, and I'm not paying you multiple of that. So I can kind of almost, it's great you had a good year. That's interesting. It's better than a bad year. But I'm going to look at who you really are. You're doing 1.1, 1.2, and you make 300. So I'm basing my multiple on 300 and not at 500. And also understanding the market. This is not a big player. You're not going to have 10 people beating down the door that really know what they're doing, that are going to get in here and make real offers. So I would base my multiple on the 300, and I think 2 to 3 times is very reasonable at that multiple. So I think you're in the 700 to 900 to $1 million range, and then come in the financing is a big part of this.
Yeah, could you elaborate on that? What do you mean by that?
I think buying a business is like the Wild West at the small level, right? You can technically walk in with 3 gold bars and 100,000 in cash and say this is a down payment. There's no rule against that. There's no rule against seller finance. There's no rule against I'll pay you over 22 years. You can make up anything you want, basically. The seller has to agree and you have to agree. And obviously there's going to be a document, in between that. But it's very Wild West in what's available and what he'll accept. He might say, I want it all now, and that's it. I'd say, okay, well, maybe this isn't a deal, right?
So I
Super
just
interesting.
kind of take
Go
the
ahead.
approach, Mike, of, I'm thrilled that he just gave me his price, right? And I've found it to be really helpful in the past for me to, in negotiations, say, great, I'll pay you your price, but under my terms, right? So if you want a top tick and you want the multiple to be based off of the last 12 months, there's going to be some teeth, right, in this structure. Because if, like, and obviously I'm not going to do this. I couldn't do this because you have the bandwidth and the capacity and the operations to fold this in. But if I were in your shoes, I would probably be thinking about it. And it's easy for me to say in the cheap seats. I'd be thinking about it going in saying, hey, look, I'll pay you the price that you want under my terms. But a big portion of this is going to be earned out or in a seller note that maybe has some downside protection or a clawback. And if we're pricing it based on 500,000 in earnings, then you're going to get fully paid if we maintain $500,000 in earnings, right? For the accounts, right? Or based on attrition or however you want to measure it. And you probably want it based on earnings and he probably wants it based on revenue or something like that. But I think there's probably a scenario, right, where and it takes some work, right? Some education on his part and communication to build that trust and help show him a path towards here's how you're going to get the number you want, but I'm not giving you $1.5 million the day of closing and you ride off into the sunset. It usually, people aren't usually thrilled about it, right out of the gate. Like, sure, I'll just take it. But if what you're saying, pans out, which is that his door isn't going to get, knocked down, a few months goes by, you keep in touch, you hang around the hoop, and then all of a sudden he's like, you know what? I mean, I keep getting lowball offers. And you're like, well, actually, those are market. Those aren't lowball, they're market offers. But, hey, what do you think about that offer I gave you that's kind of creative and gets you to your number? I've seen that work fairly consistently. Not every time, right? Because as one of my friends said, all the fools aren't dead, right? Somebody could come overpay him for this business. But to me, if you want to get aggressive, that's the way to do it, right? Is
You're
to show him how you want
completely
to hit his number.
completely right. So, your price, my terms. I love that. That's huge. I think that the most underrated thing you just said is the teeth, right? So if he's going to take a note back, we're going, hey, you make $500,000, right? You make $500,000. Okay. Well, I better make $500,000 for 5 years. And if I don't, if it's really a 300, well, you're going to take a haircut.
Yep.
You can do it. It's just, it's going to be a battle because that if he's not really doing the 500, he's going to battle you back and forth the whole way down the road.
Yeah. Oh, people will, laud, and pat themselves on the back about their earnings and how confident they are. And yeah, this is sustainable. And, we're not going to churn these contracts or whatever it may be. And then all of a sudden when they're, when the road goes both ways, right, then you'll really test that metal. Right. And I've seen cases where they're like, no, I feel confident. I'll back that up. And I am willing to roll risk forward or, however you're able to structure it.
If that's the case, I'd love to pay you 1.5. No problem. Over time, but I'll pay you out your 1.5. If you really make $500,000, no problem.
I like what you said. I mean, it's very true. It is the Wild West. You could show up with 3 gold bars and a stack of cash and, whatever deal structure you want. Hey, I'll pay you $1 a year for the next 20 years. And then I'm going to pay you then I'll pay you $2 million, right? 20 years from now.
You can make up whatever you want. And this is all the small deal stuff. I mean, it's, like you said, you got to be creative. And, I think look at what other people have done and, listen to podcasts like this is a perfect example, where people come in with all kinds of ideas and ways to structure and ways to, attack these.
Mike, this was really good, man. What are you going to do as we wrap this one up? Are you going to pursue this one?
I'm definitely going to meet with the seller and kind of see, get more into the weeds as far as the details of stuff that's kind of not on paper. I think another really interesting thing about when you do your, initial meeting with the seller is is this a man of integrity? The person you're meeting, do you believe this person? Do you think that they're a good person? That's not in the numbers. It never is. And all the guys that I bought a business from, old school, by the book, very, steady Eddie kind of guys. And, I think it's difficult for someone like that to go make up 3 years of books and be this sneaky, right?
Yeah.
So I think that the meeting with the seller is a huge deal. Huge deal. That's not on paper.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You can learn probably as much in 5 minutes, right, as you need to know, but then getting that face to face, it helps them vet you too, right? I mean, that's a big part of it. You're choosing, but also they're choosing. Well, you'll have to keep us updated on how it goes. And
yeah, we'll do.
One thing that always is interesting to me in the small business world is how aggressive of anticipated timeline to close sellers want. And right, you've done this several times, right? This isn't like, hey, 45 days, 60 days to close, something like that. It's, in 9 months, right, this deal could be getting done, or longer, right? Just depends on how long it takes for things to kind of germinate and actually take root. So keep us posted, man. We're rooting for you.
We'll do.
Big thanks to our two sponsors, More Now. If you're looking for the ability to hire and retain talent from overseas, More Now seems like a really good kind of turnkey solution to that. So thank you to those guys, and to cloudbookkeeping.com. If you have any cloud bookkeeping needs or bookkeeping needs that you're thinking about upgrading and getting a trusted partner, you should give those guys a look. Mike, what can our guests do to follow along with your journey and see what you're doing and support you in whatever way?
So the only social media I'm on is Twitter, and my handle is Sign the Fronts. It's something I stole from my dad when he would talk about his business, saying, "Yeah, I'm just signing the fronts of checks. That's all I'm doing. Not signing the backs." So it's kind of a little homage to my dad, but. Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Sign the Fronts.
I love that. I had one of my jobs, my first job, one of the coworkers was complaining to the boss, and the boss said, "You know what? The difference is between you and me, I sign the front of the check and you sign the back." So I love that. That's really good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Mike. Looking forward to following along, and thanks everybody for listening. We'll see you again next week.
Thanks for having me, guys.